Hello and welcome to the DraftKings Daily Trot. I'm Big Italy 42. He's Scott Mailwig at Sports 25 to Life, and we kind of broke down pitchers on the pitcher nail down as we do each Monday. And a rare instance where there's multiple pitchers we're actually considering. I mean, quite a few guys in play tonight actually. So if you want the in-depth analysis, that's where we looked a lot. But we'll go ahead and start at starting pitcher here. Garrett Cole going to be a very popular play against Arizona, who we know much better offense at home. Cole probably talent-wise. One of, if not the best pitcher on the board tonight. Going to be popular at 10,600, a pretty fair price for him with that being that huge favorite at minus 220. You expect he's going to get plenty of run support with Hellickson on the other side too. So he's going to be your chalk cash game play. But I know there's another guy similarly priced that you like quite a bit, or if not more.
Yeah, definitely. I think Cole's going to be probably the highest owned guy on DraftKings. I'd be pretty surprised if he wasn't.
Yep.
He's just priced around so many guys that I think, in general, the public thinks he's better than, and that's generally what leads to guys being really heavily owned at pitcher. My personal favorite play is Cole Hamels. Like you mentioned, we discussed it in depth on the pitching pod. I like him against the Seattle lineup that features a ton of lefties. Small favorite at minus 130, but good enough for me when he's not facing a pitcher that I'm really overly worried about. So, I mean, I like him the most. I don't feel like super strongly about it. I think Cole can very easily be the top pitcher on this slate as well as a couple other guys. We talked about Sonny Gray quite a bit also. I think he's my favorite GPP play on DraftKings because of the price discrepancy of him being so much more expensive than the other aces on this slate. I think he's going to be single-digit owned for sure against a Baltimore team that strikes out a ton. It gives them a lot of upside. Definitely Hamels and Cole are the two cash game guys for me. I think you could probably throw Kazmir in there if you wanted to, but I'm not super excited about him today with the way Tampa Bay's been hitting lefties lately.
Yep.
He's a decent favorite, though, so, I mean, we can toss that in there, I guess. I want to see do you have a line on St. Louis and San Francisco yet? Because I don't have one.
I do. It is minus 155, 7-run total for Waka.
Okay, so I mean those are pretty solid numbers. At 10-1, I think he's a solid cash game play too. There's a lot of cash game plays that are pretty interesting today, especially in these cheaper guys that we're going to get to in a second here. I like Gray in GPPs. You mentioned Danny Salazar as a guy that you love in GPPs.
Yeah.
I think he has a ton of strikeout upside in this one. I mean, Boston's not going to go out there and score 20 runs every game. I mean, there were plenty of games where they haven't even scored 2 runs. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's not – I mean, you can look at that and be a little bit worried about it, but I think you have to approach each game as it's a unique situation, and I think he's a really interesting GPP play tonight. Andrew Haney, really similar in that 9,000 range on DraftKings, is really the only guy there facing a White Sox team that has been better lately but hasn't been very good this year, especially against lefties. I think he has a decent amount of upside, at least in terms of I could see him easily going 7 + 8 innings today.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the other side of that same game, Carlos Rodon, we know, had a huge game against this same team last time out. While he probably isn't going to replicate that, you imagine he's going to have little trouble with the bottom of this order because, I mean, top to bottom, they're really struggling. But once you get past Pujols, Trout, not a whole lot to worry about. And then your cheap guys, Colin Ray against Atlanta. We know Atlanta's just a terrible offense right now. This guy had posted great numbers in the minor leagues.
Yep.
He's really cheap. So you got to like him. And then I know you like Brian Mitchell for his strikeout upside, but also kind of gave the disclaimer that he is a bullpen guy, so we're not expecting him to pitch, more than probably 5 innings here.
Right, yeah. I mean, you really need him to get to that 5th inning for him to be even remotely in play for cash games. GPPs, I mean, you might be able to get away with if you have a really strong lineup. But like you said, I mean, he's tough to play in cash games just because of the innings. A couple other guys we mentioned that we're not super high on, but we should probably mention them. Chris Tillman against Oakland is an interesting GPP play at 5,500. Then I think the other one you had was Matt Garza at 6,100, right? Against Miami.
And I think he's more of a secondary cash game play.
Yeah, that's
Miami's
true.
Bad. He doesn't have much strikeout upside at this point. Maybe he did 10 years ago, but not so much now. But he's been effective. I mean, his last 3 starts has only given up a total of 9 hits. So, I mean, this is a Miami team. I mean, they have an ISO below 1, I think it is, over the past month. Just really nobody that can hurt you right now.
Yep, definitely.
All right, catcher options. If we're talking about the chalk, if you can afford him, Brian McCann's probably going to be a really popular play, as he is at home against mediocre righty and Kyle Gibson. He's $4,600 though, so you got to pay quite a bit for him. I'm going back to Jonathan Lucroy here, $3,300. He gets a lefty at home, a young, not very good lefty in that, and $3,300. I think a great price for him. The Brewers are one of those teams that probably I think should have ownership tonight, but I don't think they necessarily will because they haven't been great as a team. Been kind of the one-offs that have been doing well, but he and Ryan Braun especially, I'm a big fan of tonight.
Yeah, definitely. I like those three guys. I think those are probably where I'm going to look the most. Lucroy for sure. I think he's just way underpriced on DraftKings. A couple guys I like for GPPs. Yan Gomes is still hitting fifth in the lineup against righties for Cleveland. He's facing a pitcher in Barnes that, I mean, has not been good so far. I'm not sold on him being as bad as he's been, but I think Gomes is an interesting GPP play at 3,600. Stephen Vogt at 3,600. He's been much better over the past two series. He's facing a righty in Tillman that didn't look great in his first start back from the DL at Baltimore, which is a huge power park for left-handed hitters.
Yep.
That's a really interesting one for me. And then if you're looking for someone really cheap, I'm throwing Hamels a lot tonight, so I'm not going to use him. But Jesus Montero has been really good against lefties over the last couple of weeks. He's only 2,200 at catcher for Seattle. Probably going to hit sixth or seventh in the order. He's an interesting GPP play for me at 2,200.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. I mean, if I'm going to punt catcher, I'm going to go with the guy that at least has some upside because you're not expecting much out of these guys down at the bottom, but give yourself some power at least with Montero. First base options, there's quite a few. David Ortiz, if you want to try to chase a homer against Danny Salazar, that is his one weakness, giving up too many home runs. Ortiz has looked great over the past week or so.
Yeah.
Other options, though, Mark Teixeira going to be a popular play. Another one of those, well, he's a switch hitter against Kyle Gibson. He's got an ISO over 300 against right-handed pitching this year, so you got to like him. But I don't mind saving a little bit of money and going Jose Abreu against Andrew Heaney. Heaney's been fine for the most part, but giving up a ton of hard contact so far this year. His hard contact rate, I just had it, 36.2%.
Yep.
So, I mean, when he's getting hit hard, and Jose Abreu doesn't hit the ball soft. So I'm a big fan of his at that price.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great price for him. That's probably the biggest reason to use him.
Yep.
4,400 is rock solid there. A couple other guys that are relatively cheap. Albert Pujols against Rodon. You mentioned Rodon has a ton of strikeout upside, but he's going to have to go through Trout and Pujols, both guys who hit lefties pretty well. And Pujols is only 4,100. I mean, he's priced like he's facing a much better pitcher. Yep. He's obviously been a little bit cold lately, but as we saw early in the season, I mean, he can turn that around really quick. As far as a little bit higher price guys go, Prince Fielder, I don't mind. I think people are going to shy away from the Rangers because Walker's been fairly good against lefties, only a 298 WOBA allowed to lefties, but he does give up a ton of power to them at 148 ISO. So there's definitely some upside if Walker's missing high in the zone there with some of these Texas lefties. So Fielder's interesting. I think we covered most of the guys I'm going to use. There's no one really particularly cheap that I would use today at first base. Justin Bour maybe against Garza for 3,000, but I don't particularly love it.
Yeah, and he hasn't been particularly good. He's just the power upside kind of guy.
Yeah.
One guy who's actually been pretty good, and we're talking hitting for average too, which is not common for him. Pedro Alvarez at 3,600.
Yeah.
First or third base eligible against Hellickson. I like him. And then I'll kind of transition to second with this guy. I'm not playing him at first, but at second, I love Logan Forsythe anytime he faces a lefty. Casimir's a good lefty, but $3,400 for a guy who has an over 300 ISO against lefties. Definitely a guy I want to look at in tournaments. And then elsewhere at second base, you like Brian Dozier against Mitchell. Well, Mitchell and the Yankees bullpen, you assume. But I think my favorite play is going to be Neil Walker at $4,000 once again against Hellickson.
Yeah, I mean, Hellickson's just been so bad that it's really hard not to target a lot of these Pittsburgh bats against him. D. Gordon is a cash game play against Garza. I don't mind. Garza's awful at keeping runners on first base, and Gordon obviously is one of the best base stealers in the league. He hasn't been hitting very well lately, but I mean, he'll probably get 5 at-bats in this game, I would think. And at 4,400, I think he's a decent cash game play. You mentioned couple of these Tampa Bay guys already. Forsythe is the big one. If Tim Beckham's in the line, hitting second in the lineup again against a lefty, he's only 2,500. He also has shortstop eligibility. I'll it's probably more likely I'll use him there because I like more second baseman tonight.
True.
Colton Wong is another cash game second baseman I'm pretty interested in against Heston. We mentioned when we were talking about him on the pitcher pod that he's really struggled against lefties this year. So Wong makes an interesting play for me at 3,900.
Yeah, especially because he always seems to have a great lineup spot, either second or fifth. So
Yep.
you either get the lot of run scoring upside or a lot of RBI upside. So I'm a big fan of his there as well. All right, moving on here to third base, Matt Carpenter, and all of a sudden his power bat. I won't say all of a sudden, but this season at least, $4,700. You mentioned the lefty struggles there. I'm not going to be stacking the Cardinals necessarily, but you want pieces of their best hitters. So Matt Carpenter is certainly one of their best hitters there, but he's expensive. Guy who makes a ton of hard contact against righties. Well, actually, two guys, Alex Rodriguez and Miguel Sano, both those guys there. You mentioned how the Texas bats maybe going underowned. Adrian Beltre quietly been really hot recently at really low ownership. So his last 4 games, a 3-hit game, a 2-hit game, homers in back-to-back games. Overall numbers not impressive, but the way he's hitting right now, he's got a little bit of a discount here in this matchup.
Yeah, and I mentioned Walker's actually been pretty good against lefties. He's not been as good against righties and has been even worse in terms of power against righties and home runs allowed. 1.96 ISO allowed to righties on the season. 1.1 home runs per 9 rate. I mean, not terrible, but definitely something you can take advantage of there with Beltre, where you would think that it would be the lefties that you would want. And Beltre is probably one of the better plays because of how hot he's been in the price. I had someone else right in that same range too. Oh, Jung-Ho Kang, who I'm sure you were going to get to for Pittsburgh. I like him quite a bit against Hellickson, hitting in the 4 or 5 hole here. Don't need to say a ton more about why we like the Pittsburgh guys today, but he's pretty interesting at 3,500 with both shortstop and third base eligibility today.
Yeah, I like that a lot. He's got a ton of upside. And then the only cheap third baseman I'm really looking at, and this is for power upside with the park shift, is Derek Dietrich. Not a guy that really does a whole lot other than hit for power. He's not a guy that hits for great average. And like I mentioned, Matt Garza hasn't been bad, not allowing a lot of base runners, but it doesn't take much at Miller Park. Dietrich gets a hold of one. 2,700, not a bad punt option for you. Shortstop options, you already mentioned Gong. I like him. Johnny Peralta is usually a good cash game play, but Chris Heston's been pretty good against righties, so I'm not saying not to play him, but he's not a guy that I'm going to force into my lineups tonight at that price. Another guy who just continues to be hot is Asdrubal Cabrera, one of the many Tampa Bay batters that have been crushing lefties, so you got to like him as well. And then, as you look at cheaper guys, there's really nobody that really stands out to me down here as far as really cheap guys. I mean, Steven Drew is one of those guys that always seems to have that power upside, but he bats 9th for 2,700. If Marwin Gonzalez is in the lineup, I like him because it seems like whenever he gets a start and bats near the top, he just produces like he did yesterday. So any cheap guy that's catching your eye here?
Yeah, Beckham that I mentioned at second base, if he's in the 2 hole, is probably my favorite cheap guy at shortstop. I'm thinking Segura is probably going to lead off for Milwaukee today, although he's not really cheap, but 3,500 against a lefty at Nicolino is probably a pretty interesting play in GPPs at least. Other really cheap guys, there's just not a lot to like. I mean, Ketel Marte against Hamels, he's probably going to lead off, but I don't particularly like him from the right side of the plate against Hamels, even at 2,800. Jose Ramirez at 3,300 is probably the most solid cash game play, although he hasn't been very good despite hitting leadoff every single game.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, pretty barren down there cheap at shortstop. Tons of options in the outfield, as there always are. Nelson Cruz gets a lefty. It is Cole Hamels, but certainly if you're playing a lot of GPP lineups, you're going to want some exposure at some point because he's the one bat you feel like you need to have that's priced. Well, for me, the one expensive bat that I don't necessarily want to force into my lineups, but I know I'm going to get some exposure because it is a lefty and it is in great ballpark. But I prefer guys like Ryan Braun at 4,600 against the lefty at home. I think he's in a great spot. Mike Trout gets a lefty in Rodon. We mentioned he's been struggling, but he's certainly a guy you're looking at. But Andrew McCutchen, once again, I mean, it's a Pirates bat. No more analysis necessary there.
Yeah, I mean, Marte's solid too at 4,400. He's leaving a little bit underpriced, it feels like. And then Gregory Polanco might be the best out of the 3 at 4,300. I mean, you could realistically play all of the Pirates today and feel pretty good about it, honestly. That's how bad Hellickson's been. Looking at a couple of these other guys, Josh Reddick is interesting at 4,000 against Tillman. Brett Gardner and Jacoby Ellsbury. We mentioned how much we like some of these Yankees lefties today in Yankee Stadium against a righty in Gibson that hasn't been very good against lefties. He hasn't been terrible, but he hasn't been good against them either. Um, Shane Victorino is a cheap guy that I'll look at. 2,600, probably leading off like he has been against every lefty. Um, he's an interesting one for me. Coco Crisp. I mean, the guy's just on fire now. 7 games in a row he's been on base. You heard me the other day when I called him out for not getting to second base and hit 3 doubles.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what to do with him, but he's 2,300 again, and he's going to be hitting second against Tillman in a park that's really well suited to lefties. So he's a guy I'm going to be considering again, just because I almost have to. I mean, he went up to 2,300 now, but I mean, he's still way too cheap if he's hitting second in the order and he's getting on base every game. So
yeah.
I'm not going to argue with him.
No, he seems like one of those guys that you make your whole lineup and you get down to the bottom, you have 2,300 left, and you're like, damn it. All right, I'll play Coco Chris because he's there, and you just hope that he hits the ball.
I've been happy with it every single day, though, lately. Not necessarily in GPPs, besides the day that I refused to play him and he hit 3 doubles, but
it's a personal vendetta against you.
Yeah, it is. He listens to me every day and just does the opposite of whatever I say.
All right, well, if you're on him, then I'll make sure to have some of him tonight, then, because he's guaranteed to get his 3 doubles tonight.
Yeah, Preston Tucker is probably my favorite middle-of-the-road guy in the outfield on DraftKings. He's 3,300 against the righty and Ramirez that has been pretty good, but I'm not a huge believer in him. And Tucker's just been phenomenal against righties. 366 WOBA, 267 ISO, hitting cleanup behind those 3 speedsters at the top of the Houston lineup. I mean, there's just a lot to like about him every day, and I feel really good about him today.
Yeah, and another guy with some power, Chris Davis. Milwaukee Chris Davis with a K, like him as well. And then another guy where you really don't like the matchup, but he's been absolutely on fire with 5 multi-hit games in his last 6. Brock Holt, $3,300. I mean, the guy's just been mashing the ball. You don't love Salazar matchup today, but he is at home, and if that offense keeps it going, then you got to imagine he's going to be a nice, cheap source of some upside as well.
I have a couple other cheap guys we can mention.
Okay.
Brandon Guyer, we mentioned Tampa Bay's been hitting lefties really well. He's 2,900, probably going to hit leadoff again. And Michael Bourne's back in the leadoff spot again for Atlanta, assuming he's still hitting leadoff. And you're not using Ray, I think he's an interesting value at 2,700. I'm not super excited about it, but there's some base stealing upside that really comes into play on DraftKings, and I mean he's going to get 4 bats from the leadoff spot for sure. So 2,700 is definitely underpriced there.
Yeah, I like that. And then I'll throw a one $2,000 guy, Abraham Almonte. Not a particularly talented player, really, but 5 of his 9 games since coming up, he's got at least 9 DraftKings points and flat minimum against a bad pitcher in Matt Barnes. Don't mind chasing a little bit of upside with him in some spots tonight. All right, that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out our optimizer and a lot of great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.